All right, hello everybody. I'll give everyone a few seconds to get settled. Thanks, Megan, for getting this set up for me, and just make sure everybody's in and joining. So, in case anybody doesn't know who I am, my name is Matt Danner. I'm the owner and founder of Monolith Forensics. Hi, Greg. Thanks for joining. I appreciate the attendance. So again, I'm the owner and founder of a company called Monolith Forensics. Our primary the software we primarily make is a piece of software called Monolith. It's lab and case management software for digital forensics teams, labs, e-discovery companies, consulting companies, pretty much the whole gamut. So that's primarily what we work on is Monolith. That's what our bread and butter is. That's where all of our revenue and everything comes from. But from time to time, I like to work on side projects and just kind of experiment with different things, talk to all of our users and kind of figure out what things they're working on, what kind of problems they run into. And if I can, I have me and some friends of mine that we will get together and sometime make these little tools that can kind of help out in small ways. So in this presentation, what I'm going to be introducing is a tool that I've called Neptune. I called it Neptune not for any particular reason other than I just like the way it sounds. The word Neptune doesn't necessarily mean anything. I just like the word, and it seemed like a good project name for this. So what I've learned over the years of running Monolith is in talking to just dozens of users, especially in law enforcement across specifically in America. One thing that seems to be not necessarily a headache, but just something that's a little difficult to work on can be these electronic cyber tips that all of our agencies receive from various, usually some form of cloud provider like Google or Microsoft or Dropbox or Facebook, or all these different providers where they are detecting and reporting on potential child exploitation or child abuse material that may end up on their platforms. So they report this data through, I believe, through NCMEC. And I'll be the first to say, just FYI, I am not a cyber tip expert. I do not, I've never really had an experience processing or reviewing cyber tips, but part of this project was based on me talking to people that I know about cyber tips. Just to give some credit to those guys, talking to Charlie Rubisoft over at the Mississippi AG's office, talking to Jonathan Todd at the Davidson County Sheriff's Office in North Carolina, talking to some of the guys at the Boulder County Sheriff's Office or Boulder County Computer Forensics Lab. They're just various, those are the big three, but various different organizations that I've talked to about, working on these cyber tips, what it's like, who's actually working on them, what are they doing when they get these, what is the process like. And the general consensus that I've heard is that most agencies generally get a lot of these cyber tips, and they're having to really spend a lot of time going through them. In some cases, they don't have enough time to go through them. Sometimes the agency just gets so many of them that it's really hard to process them. The other problem too is that, not really a problem, but what I've also learned that was surprising to me is that a lot of the digital forensics labs aren't actually the teams that are going through these cyber tips. These are usually going to the investigators to start, and then they use these cyber tips to build or initiate full investigative cases where they may end up doing a search warrant and collecting digital evidence that is then brought to the forensic team for analysis. So I thought that was interesting, but what that led me to realize is that while we in the forensics lab may have a lot of fancy and interesting tools to help us, process and review data for cyber tips, a lot of times these, CSAM investigators don't necessarily have those tools at their disposal. So a few months back, I started toying with the idea of trying to build a tool that helps, kind of not only quickly, review cyber tips, but something that's relatively lightweight that can be installed on just about any computer and help with really managing and just going through these cyber tip files. So what that ended up in is this product called Neptune. So first and foremost, there's no cost. This is going to be a free application that anybody that works on cyber tips is free to access and use. So what that also means too is support for this product may be a little light. We will probably work on it whenever we have time to. We'll add features to it periodically. It has a built-in updater, so as we push out updates, the software is smart enough to know when a new update is available, so it will notify users when there's a new update available. But basically, part of the reason we were able to put this together is really just we took a lot of what we've learned in building Monolith and what we've learned in the different technology that we've either built ourselves or discovered through the process of working on and building Monolith, and we've taken all that knowledge and put it into this application to try to build a system that makes looking at these cyber tips a lot more useful. And for whoever's watching, as I'm talking, if you have any questions at all, please ask. Just throw it in the chat or throw it in the Q&A, and I'll hop into those questions and answer them as we move along. So just to get started, I want to point out the two major use cases for something like Neptune. One is going to be really we're trying to make it a little bit faster and more efficient to process cyber tips. So that way, if you're getting 8, 10, a dozen, 30 cyber tips a week, now you have an application that can hopefully help you go through those very quickly. Okay. The other thing that we're trying to accomplish in Neptune also is we're just trying to reduce the impact of looking at these images on a consistent basis. So obviously the whole point of a cyber tip is that these are different cloud service providers and other types of providers reporting to law enforcement that they have detected what they think might be child exploitation or child abuse material. And because of that, since we're getting so many of these cyber tips just over long periods of time, if we're looking through this stuff, it can cause some mental impact to us, and we can have some negative psychological effects of looking at this data. So we've built in some features to try to help reduce the impact of that. We're designing this around quickly going through this data to be able to quickly triage it, assess what the data is, determine if it's worthy of investigation. And then we're also trying to do it in a way that reduces the impact of actually viewing these images in a bulk and long-term way. So if we get started, the way these work, the way this program works, the first thing is it's specifically designed for cyber tips. So it can only process zip files. So it's not a system where you're just going to load random files into it and it's going to do a bunch of processing. It's just specifically for zip files. Having said that, we don't necessarily know what you're loading. If you're loading in a zip file, we don't necessarily know if it's a cyber tip or not. So it's going to try to process whatever you give it as long as it's a zip file. But ideally, this is really best used for specific cyber tip files. So to give you kind of an overview of the layout of the user interface here, we have a basic sidebar here. And whenever you open the software, you're going to start with this My Cyber Tips section. And in this section, we have basically, a process board here where we can see basically a very basic workflow of how we're working on cyber tips. So the idea is we load a cyber tip, and every time we load a cyber tip, it starts in the pending stage. So right here, this is just as we get cyber tips, we can literally just load them all here, and they're going to stay in this pending column until we're ready to process them. Once we start processing cyber tips, they're going to move into the processing stage, which means that Neptune is currently processing these cyber tips, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. Once the cyber tip is done processing, it will then be moved to the ready to review stage, which means, okay, the cyber tips in this column are ready for us to take a look at. And once we look at them, we can do some other things, which I'll describe in a moment. And then once we have decided that our review is finished, we can mark them as reviewed, and they will be moved into this reviewed column, which is basically our way of saying, we've already looked at these cyber tips, we've already assessed them, and we've done what we wanted to with them. Neptune, the way Neptune works is it relies heavily on hash values. So one of the features that we built in was just a simple hash search feature. So this isn't anything fancy. It's just really, if you want to know if a certain hash value exists in your current Neptune database, you can just throw a hash value in here and then it will search and find and search your database to see if you currently have that hash value somewhere in your database. It's a very simple feature. There's really nothing to it. You just type in a hash value and it either finds it or it doesn't. If we hop into our settings, again, settings is very simple. The only setting we have right now is just the ability to import hash values from Project Vic. So the way this works is you can basically just, if you have a Project Vic JSON file, again, it has to be the JSON formatted version of Project Vic hash values. You just select the import hashes button and Neptune will start importing the hashes. So just be warned that a couple of caveats to this. Usually these Project Vic full hash sets are usually 15, 17, 20, 25 gigs in size. They have literally over 100 million hashes in them. So it can take a while to go through that entire hash set and import all of them. The second caveat is that Neptune is ignoring category 0 hashes. And the reason for that is just to make things a little bit faster and more efficient. By ignoring those category 0 hashes and not importing them, it'll make the import process a lot faster. And like I said, the point of Neptune is really to try to triage and quickly go through CyberTip files so that we can identify known files and quickly triage unknown files. We don't really care about category 0 files because they're just saying that category 0 are just non-relevant or non-CSAM based files. What we care about is we want to quickly identify files that we know are potentially known bad or files that are worthy of investigation. So if we wanted to, so for example, I'll import a sample hash set that I have. Let's see. There we go. Here's a sample hash. I'll go ahead and import that. And this was just a sample file that has 371 hash profiles in it. And what the import looks like here is that we've imported 226 total new hashes. 113 of them were MD5, 113 of them were SHA-1 files. Out of all of the 226 that we imported, 113, we had 113 items that are category 2. None of those files had category 1 or category 3. And then we had 258 items that were category 0. So what that means is that, and also if you happen to have hashes that already exist in your database, they're not going to be imported again, and they'll be thrown into this duplicates pile. So that whenever you import a hash set, you'll be able to see the record of basically how many duplicates were there that did not get included, how many new MD5 hashes do we have, how many new SHA-1 hashes do we have, what was the total amount in that particular set. So in this one, it was 371. How many category 1s, 2s, and 3s did we have? And then here with this category 0, since we're not importing category 0, we can see that, okay, 258 category 0 hashes were not imported, okay? So the big two things here is if we're importing hashes, we're not including category 0, and we're not duplicating any hash values. So if the hash already exists in your database, it's not going to be re-imported again. And the reason for that is just because we want to keep that database of hashes as efficient as possible. And it really just doesn't do us any good to have duplicate hash values in our database. It's just going to increase the length of time it takes to query our hashes and check them against files that we're searching. Okay, so if we start, if we take you through this workflow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add just a single CyberTip for now. I'm going to click the Add CyberTip folder. I have a predetermined set of data in here already. So here I've got some basically fake CyberTip files. And I'm going to start I'll just process this one first. And we'll go ahead and load it. So by default, what happens whenever we load a CyberTip, it will stay in this pending stage. And all this means is that we've just let Neptune know that we have a CyberTip file that we want to start working on. If we want to process this, we'll click the Process CyberTips file button here, And what this does is it takes all the cyber tips that are in this pending column, and they will move to this processing stage. And as each of the cyber tips, and while they're in this processing stage, what this means is that Neptune in the background is doing some stuff, doing some processing with the files that are in this cyber tip. And you can have 20, 30, 100 cyber tips sitting here, and what Neptune is going to do is it's just going to one by one with each of these cyber tips, it's going to process each one of them in a batch. And you can continue adding them as you add cyber tips. So what you effectively have is a processing queue. So you don't have to wait for if you have 100 cyber tips in this processing queue, it doesn't matter. You can add more cyber tips anytime you want. And what Neptune does is it just builds a process queue where it just goes through each of the cyber tips one at a time until it's finished processing everything in this queue. Once it's finished, the cyber tip moves into this ready to review column. And all that means is that now we've done the processing on the data in this cyber tip and we can start looking at it. So what that means is I can just click on the cyber tip. And what this does is it immediately pulls up this list of files that were located in that cyber tip system, in that cyber tip file. And just as an overview of this view and what it's displaying here, if we go to the header here, we have a back button here. All this does is it just takes us back to our main workflow view. We also have the name of the cyber tip. And what this does, this is actually a link. And what this is going to do is it will open a folder that shows us the results of us processing all of this data. So if I click on this, you can't see this right now. I'll have to share it in my screen. Let me see if I can I'll switch screens really quick so you can see this. So here what you see is the end result of us processing this cyber tip. And basically what Neptune does is when you upload that zip file, it extracts all of its contents, it appends a unique identifier to the end. It creates a folder and then appends a unique identifier to the end of this cache folder that we've created. And then we extract all the contents of that zip file. And now we have the bare files sitting here in our file system. Where this is located, this is going to be this is on Mac OS, so this will be in our application support folder for the user. In Windows, this is going to be in the user's app data folder. At some point in the future, we may allow you to adjust this so you can actually set where the cache location should be. But this is something to be cognizant of because as you process these CyberTip files, the cache data is going to be located somewhere. So from time to time, you may want to clear this data out or just be aware that whatever the contents of these CyberTip files are, they're going to end up in this specific place. But from here, if for whatever reason we want to manually look through these files, we can. We just click the header of that CyberTip view, and it will open the cache location for us. So I'm going to switch back to Neptune. So continuing on, we also have just a simple count of total media files. So this is just telling us how much media was in this particular CyberTip. In this case, we have 22. On the far right, we have a checkbox that where we just mark this. Once we're done looking at this data, we can mark it as reviewed. And once it's reviewed, it then is placed into our reviewed column. And then we can remove that review check anytime we want. And it goes back to our ready to review system. The other feature we have are these forward and back buttons, which right now these don't work because we only have one CyberTip file that's processed. I can add another one here. I'll add this one here. I'll go ahead and process. And so this is going to process, and then when it's done, it's going to again move into our ready to review section once it's done. And now we have two CyberTips that are ready to review. So what that means is now these arrows will actually work. It'll switch us quickly, allow us to switch between these two CyberTips. So what we're building here is we're trying to build an efficient workflow so that if you have, let's say you have a dozen of these that you need to go through, you can just select one of them, start going through all the data, and then when you're done with it, you can mark it as reviewed and go to the next one. And then basically keep doing that. Moving along, if we drill back into the rest of this content, we see that we have three different tabs here. One is called unknown media, the next one is known media, the next one is other files. Basically what this boils down to is unknown media and known media are basically any files that we've detected or determined are media files. So that means these would be videos or images of some kind. Other files are going to be anything else. Anything else that's not a video or an image is going to go into the other files category. And then specifically what these two media categories are telling us is saying, hey, if this is unknown, this means that the hash value of this file does not match any hashes that are in our current database, which means we don't know what this file is yet. We haven't looked at it. It doesn't match anything we've seen before, so we may need to investigate it. If we look in known media, right now this is empty because this is a fresh Neptune database, so we don't have any hashes or anything yet. So none of these files matched with any hash values that are currently in our hash database for this current iteration of Neptune. And of course, other files is also empty because this file doesn't have any other files other than video and media. Now, what will happen is most of these CyberTip files have a PDF report that's associated with them. That PDF report is going to show up here in the other files section. So whenever you want to look at the CyberTip PDF report, it will show here. And when it is, you can just, if you want to view it, you can just click this open file and it will open it up in your native file viewer on your host system. So now if we're ready to start looking at these, you'll notice a couple of things. One is right here with each file, we're seeing some metadata related to it. We can see here's the size, here's the original file name, and here's the MD5 hash. And we also down here have a categorization. So it's just telling us right off the bat, this is uncategorized. Neptune does not know what category this file is or what it should be. And if it's known media, the categories are also going to be marked, because as we go through, and if you're importing project Vic hashes, or as you're categorizing files in Neptune, Neptune is going to remember based on the hashes what category that we provided. So the next time we run into this image again, the image will be hashed and pre-categorized for us. You'll also notice too that we see some thumbnails here for a lot of these images, but they're all blurred out. So they're blurred and their grayscale is turned up. So this is part of our effort to try to reduce the impact of looking at this data. So basically these images and everything are blurred by default so that the user doesn't have to see the full content until they're ready to look at it or until they want to. So if we wanted to see the full content, we have some hotkeys built in. So if I want to remove the blur, I'll just hit Control-B, and that immediately removes the blur on all of these images. And you'll notice that these are all still in grayscale. So if I want to add color back to it, I can hit just type on the keyboard Control-G, and that adds our color back to the files. The other thing we can do is if we look at the far right of these files, we have a couple of options here. One is the view file option, we have open file option, and we have view EXIF data. The top view file, all that does is it brings us to this internal Neptune view where we can see basically a lot of metadata related to the file. And we also see smack in the middle of the view, we have a version of the image as well. And again, by default, this is blurred out and grayscale is turned on. So if we want to actually view this image, we can either click this button here to unblur it, or we can hit Control-B. Whatever option you feel makes sense. And also we can blur it since it's an image. We can actually we can rotate these images as necessary. So if we need to rotate them around, we can. This just happens to be my COVID vaccination card from a while back. And we can blur this back. And then we can also navigate through these images really quickly as well. So right now I'm just using the up and down keys on my keyboard to quickly scan through these images. And as you can see right now, they're all blurred and grayscaled out. So if I want to, I can remove the blur, keep grayscale on, and just kind of quickly go through all of these images as I need to. Where the idea again is this is helping us go through these images quickly, and it's giving us some tooling to try to reduce the impact overall of us actually viewing these images and just trying to make looking at this stuff a little bit easier. The next step here is once we're looking at these images, we have these category buttons up here, so we can start categorizing these items. So as we're looking at things, we can determine, what category we think these images are. You'll notice as I'm categorizing items, this category here is automatically updating as we're, updating the categories. And also, if we close out our full screen view here, the category is also updating here in our view. And what's happening is, as we're categorizing these items, that categorization is getting stored in the Neptune database and being linked to those hashes. So as we run those categorizations, the next time we scan these images, Neptune will automatically be able to tell you what category image it is. And again, we can do this, and we can click on these. These are clickable, but these are also mapped to the number keys on your keyboard. So we can also just use the keyboard to quickly switch the category of these. So most of the things you can do in Neptune have keyboard bindings, so that you can just go through this stuff and use the keyboard without even touching your mouse if you don't want to. And basically, we can use these arrows too to just go through and just quickly go through all of these images, categorize them as needed, and as we go through, they're being categorized. The other feature that we have here is part of the sort of processing pipeline that's going on with Monolith is we're hashing the values, and if we look at this file, we'll see that we're actually calculating 3 hashes for this. We're calculating an MD5, we're calculating a SHA-1, and we're calculating a SHA-256. The SHA-256 is probably not as useful. It's probably not something that we're using very often, but just in case if we ever need it, we're calculating it on purpose. We can also see some other metadata statistics about this file. So here's the original file name as it was inside the CyberTip. Let me pause here. I've got a question here. Is there a way to view all images items in a certain category at the same time? Not currently, no. So we currently don't have any filters yet for just seeing all category 1 images for right now. But that's probably something we'll add in the future, is just kind of a way to quickly filter through and see, like, here's all the category 1 files for the CyberTip, or even maybe run some metrics about here's all the category 1 files that we've seen in this database, and potentially even run some stats on the actual hashes that are in this database. So there's lots of interesting stuff like that we can do, but this is like version 1.0, so we're just now getting this out, and we might have some more features for it in the future. And also, by the way, we have this view file link here, but we can also just press spacebar. If we press spacebar, it pulls it up, and it'll also close it. So we can use spacebar to toggle this full screen mode anytime we want. So like I said, this is the image name, the file name. Here's the file size, so the size of the file. Here's the extension. Category for this is currently unknown, so we can change that to 0 or 1. UUID, this is just a random ID that Neptune is generating for this particular file, so that it can be uniquely referenced across Neptune and the database. Obviously, we have hash values here, like I explained earlier. Is known. So what this means is that is known means no, which all this means is just saying at the time that we process this CyberTip, did we know what this file was? Did we already have a record of seeing this file by its hash before? And the answer is no. It stays as unknown even after we've reviewed it and categorized it, because basically the first time we see this file, basically what we're saying is when we processed this CyberTip, this was the first time we saw this file. If I process this CyberTip again, this isn't necessarily going to say, this is going to say yes. It's not going to say no, because we've already seen it. And I'll demonstrate this in a second to show how this works. Here we have our cache path. So basically this is just telling you this is where this the cache version of this file is currently located. So we can see it's sitting in my library application support folder here. CyberTip UUID, again, this is just a unique ID that we're generating for the CyberTip itself, so that we can uniquely reference it in the database. Because you may have instances where the CyberTip file name is exactly the same across multiple CyberTips. CyberTip location. So this right here is telling you this is where the CyberTip was located when we processed it. So it may or may not still be located here, but this is just saying this is where we processed the CyberTip from. And then down here, we have a timestamp that's just telling you this is when the CyberTip was added to Neptune for us to review. And you'll notice down here, we have this local hash matches. So this is just telling you, like at the time that we processed this file, did it match any hashes that we already had in the database? Right now it's 0 because this did not, at the time that we processed it, this didn't match anything in our database. So to give you an idea of how this could work, I'll quickly go through and categorize a lot of these so that we can process these again. Let's say 2, 1. So these are categorized already. I'm just quickly categorizing these so that we can. Okay, good. I think we're good. So if we scroll through, we can see everything now should be categorized. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our CyberTips and I'm going to recategorize these. So this one I'm going to mark as reviewed because I've finished and just get it out of our ready to review pipeline. And then I'm going to reload this same CyberTip all over again. CyberTip 1985. And then I'll process it. It'll move into the processing stage for a couple of seconds. And now it's in our ready to review pile. So again, this is the exact same CyberTip as this, and you're going to notice something pretty interesting. And I'm reading a Q&A here. Okay, the question is, are we getting the CyberTips directly from NECMEC into the program, or do we have to manually download them since they have to be in zip file form and then drag and drop in the system? Yes, so you have to manually add these to Neptune. So unfortunately, we're not pulling them directly from NECMEC. They have to be downloaded from NECMEC and loaded into Neptune directly. And we don't have drag and drop implemented yet, but when you add a CyberTip, you can actually select multiple at once and add them all in one go. And as time goes by, if there's other workflows that emerge that we can add to help adding these to Neptune a little bit easier, we can certainly do that. Now, if we hop back into this CyberTip, what we'll notice is our unknown media tab is now blank. There's nothing here. If we hop into our known media, suddenly we have all of this known stuff, and you can see everything is already pre-categorized for us. And that's because when we processed this CyberTip the first time, when we processed this one, basically Neptune stored in the database all of our entries and all of our categorization for those files based on their hashes. So that when we processed all of these same files again, since they all have the same hashes, they just resolved in the database to the categorization that we've already selected. So because of this, now we automatically already know, okay, here are files that we've already categorized, or these were categorized in the NECMEC Project Vic data, or any other hash sets that we've happened to include or load into Neptune. And this is generally the idea, is that hopefully over time, as CyberTips are being processed more and more often, that you're basically getting more of this pre-categorization that's occurring, and then you can quickly and more easily make a decision about what should be done with the CyberTip, whether it should be converted to a full investigation, or if it's maybe not quite up to the standard you require to start a full case. Last thing here I want to cover is we're also processing EXIF data for these files. So not only are we calculating hash values, but we're also extracting EXIF data from any file that is being processed. So for this image, for example, we can click on the View EXIF Data button, and we can just literally scroll through all of the EXIF data that was pulled from this item. So even with this item, we're seeing things like here's geographical location or GPS location information. We can see some digitization timestamps. We can see make and model information about the device that was used to create it. So this is clearly an Apple device of some kind, probably an iPhone. I'm pretty sure it's my iPhone because I think I took this picture. Yep, and here's a make and model right here, iPhone 13 Pro. So basically, as you're going through these and you're looking at stuff, you can quickly kind of not only see some basic metadata details, but you can also view the EXIF data anytime you want. So maybe this could be useful. This is something I know that whenever I've done forensics, EXIF data has been a big part of analysis. So I'm hoping by putting this all in one place, it makes it really easy for you guys to look through this data and get the information you need to quickly, so that it's easier to process. You'll also notice too that down here, since when we processed this, we had already seen this file before at some point in our history, we now have this match here that's being displayed. So we can see now that, okay, we actually have seen this hash before because it's pre-categorized, and here's where that hash came from. So we can see that this was matched by MD5 and that there was a cyber tip associated. It was basically, we got this from a cyber tip that we had already processed. So Joseph is asking if this is a SQLite data store. The answer is yes. This is a SQLite database, and I'm not afraid to show you what that looks like. So I'll pull that up, and give me just a second. Let me navigate to it. And actually, if you wanted to quickly find it, we can actually open up the cache location, because by default, the cache location is actually the same place as the SQLite file. Let's see here. So here's our cache. If we go here, we can navigate. This is our Neptune cache, so we can see all the cyber tips that we've processed. We go back one more folder, and now we can see here's our Neptune application folder, and here is the SQLite file. It's just neptune.db, and we can open this and take a look at it. I'm a big fan of showing people how to, break down applications that are built. Some of you are curious enough where you'll figure it out anyway, but let me kind of go through what the database looks like so everybody can see it. So you should be able to see this now. Looks like you can. This is just a DB browser for SQLite. So for the more technical folks, if you're used to using something, tools like this to browse and work with SQLite, this is just a utility to help us view the raw database data that's in the SQLite database. So if we look, we can see a few tables here. One is this CyberTip files. This is just literally a list of all the files that we've seen and processed that were pulled out of a CyberTip. So we can see here's the file name. Here's a unique identifier that we've assigned to it. Here is the related CyberTip ID. Here's the cache path, file size in bytes. Here's the MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256, and here's the extension for the file. We have a MIME type column that we're not using currently, so it's all null for right now. And then we have this is known column, and this is what's telling us, this is what's recording whether we've seen this file before or not. So you'll see most of these are all 0 until we get down here, and now we're seeing 1 because we processed that same CyberTip file twice. There's a few more. Here's our categorizations. So as we categorize these files, it's a pretty straightforward category that's being tracked here. And then we have some other columns here that are currently not being used. They're just placeholders for now. If we go to another folder, we have CyberTip matches. So what this is just doing, it's just showing us whenever we process a file, if we find a match to a specific hash, we're just keeping track of that in this table where you can say a file with this ID matched to a hash value with this hash ID. So it's just something that we use to keep track separately of the matches that we're seeing between files as we process CyberTips. And then here's a list of our CyberTips that we currently have in our database. So here you can see here's the CyberTip name, here's the status, here's the size, here's when it was added to Neptune, here's the original path, a unique ID for the CyberTip that we've generated, and then here's the cache location. So this stuff is pretty straightforward. This is not a super complicated database. It's pretty easy to navigate. Here we have a hash metadata table that we're not using currently. And then we have here's our primary hashes table. So right now this table only has 300 or so hashes in it. But if you load something like a Project Vic database or JSON file, this is going to have, because we throw away the category 0 files, this will probably end up with maybe 20 or 25 million hashes that include both MD5 and SHA-1s. And you can see here we have a checksum column, so we designate hashes based on which checksum they are. This isn't necessarily necessary because we can tell just based on the character count what kind of hash it is. But this makes searching for hashes a little bit more efficient, because then we can filter it. We look at the size of the hash being searched or matched, and then filter it based on the checksum value, so that we don't have to search the entire table and compare it to every single hash that's in this table. And you can also see here too that I've got a source here marked as Project Vic, because this is what happens whenever you use that import function. Right now we only support importing Project Vic data, so right now if you use the import, it's just going to assume that it's Project Vic data, so that you can see that's the source of this hash value when it comes in. And you can see the categorization for each of these hashes as they're being created. And what happens is we add new hashes to this as we categorize new files in Neptune. Whenever we categorize something, that's getting added to our hash database, so that the next time we scan a CyberTip, if we see that hash again, it knows to automatically categorize it appropriately. So I think that's pretty much it for the database structure there. I'll switch back to Neptune. And let's see. So Joseph's asking, any chance you might open source it or share the source? What language is it written in? So it's written in, I don't know if we're going to open source it or not. Maybe we will eventually. Kind of want to see if this thing has any traction or if it goes anywhere. But yeah, it's all written in JavaScript. So we're using a specific front-end framework that's based on JavaScript. All the back-end functions are based on JavaScript. We don't have any Python or anything built into it, even though that's possible. The only thing that we have that's not JavaScript is the software includes the EXIF tool library. So that's how we're generating EXIF data, is we just package the EXIF tool libraries with Neptune, and we're just using that to process EXIF data from the images. But yeah, we might open source this at some point. I'm not really sure yet. I haven't really decided yet on how I want to do that. I want to make sure that if we do open source it, then that's basically us saying, okay, we're not going to put any proprietary stuff in it. By open sourcing it prevents us from doing things like, building in proprietary integrations and things like that. So if we do open source it, it'll be us making a decision to say, okay, we're not putting any secret sauce stuff in here. This is all just going to be pretty straightforward technology that's going into it. So having all said that, what I'll do is let me show you how you can get access to this. So if you'd like to play with it, what you can do is just go to our website. If you go to our website, we have this section called Free Tools. And if you go there, we have some free tools here, and one of them here at the bottom is Neptune. And you can install this right now for Windows and Mac OS. So this is also version number 1, so don't be surprised if it does have some random bugs. There could also be some blind spots that we have. So if you see any problems with it, or have any, see any blind spots, or maybe we're not processing the right things, or if we're not processing everything, just let us know, give us a heads up, tell us what you're seeing, and then we can try to get to work on it. This is a free product, so support is going to be fairly limited for it. We'll answer what we can when we get a chance, but it is a free tool, so it doesn't necessarily take priority over like Monolith for our development team. And also too, the other thing is that we don't have access to actual CyberTips. So the best we can do is we give these out to some people that we know, and they try them against CyberTips that they have access to, and then they kind of report back. So our development team doesn't have the capability of just literally throwing real CyberTips at it to test it out. So there could be some weaknesses or blind spots related to that where we just haven't thrown a million cyber tips at this thing to see how it performs or how it does things. So, but yeah. So again, Megan here has posted the link to that page on our website for the tool. So please feel free to download it, give it a try. Right now, another caveat too: the Mac OS build currently, it's probably Mac OS is probably going to give you some. It's probably going to bark at you for trying to run the app. And that's just because we haven't fully notarized the app yet, which we'll probably do that today. The reason we haven't, it just takes about 30 minutes to go through the notarization process. And it's just annoying when you're trying to quickly get an app out for people to test. The way to get around that is when you install the app, just right-click on the application and then click Open from Context menu, and then macOS will give you the option to run the app anyway. If you just try to open it by double-clicking on it, macOS won't let you actually run it. And then same for Windows. The Windows installer should be fully signed, so Windows shouldn't give you any grief. But just be warned, it might give you it might bark at you for running unsafe software or something. It shouldn't, but every once in a while it does. Anyway, I'll wrap it up there. That's all I've got for now. So again, I'll stay on for another minute or so just to see if anybody has any questions. I'm happy to answer. And just hopefully you guys like it. Let us know. Give us some feedback on how it works. Especially if you're running into bugs or if you find that certain pieces of it are broken or whatever, please let us know, and we'll be happy to fix it when we get a chance. So if anyone's still here, that's the end of the presentation. So if you have questions or anything, please feel free to let me know. Otherwise, we'll lock it up here in a minute or two. Q&A here. Okay. Yep, everybody's welcome. Thank you for attending. Thanks for trying it. And all right, well, we'll make it a wrap then. Looks like everybody's pretty satisfied. So I'll wrap it up there, and I'll let Megan kind of take over and do her thing. And thanks for everybody joining. I appreciate it, and just let us know if you need anything.